Esports Podcast, Noun. A 2-hour-long video full of banter and nonsense where the guests are only introduced halfway through and the outro makes you think your internet's died. Huh.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Daring Minds here with me and Gio. And we've got as our guest for this one, neilzinho, who is the coach of Team Heretics and was previously an analyst / strategic coach. I'm not sure what terminology they use in Valorant actually, with the FPX team, which now, as complicated as this is, the core is obviously now Na'Vi. But if you remember when they were FPX, they were like fourth at the Champions Tour at the end. And they were the lineup, if people remember, that had Ardis, whereas obviously now it's like CNED instead of Na'Vi. You get the premise anyway. People get where we're at on that. So let's just start there actually, Neil, is in your team, even though people might not know Heretics that well, it's more a team, I would say, obviously now in League of Legends, people know maybe a little bit they knew in like CSGO. I know they had like a French team at one point in time, even though it's a Spanish org. But actually, if people don't know, there's a whole bunch of players in your team, they're going to know instantly that just have name value. Like obviously Mixwell, Kellogg's, these are all players we've all seen at the VCTs, the big tournaments. Like, how did you actually get this gig? Because I noticed you were doing some sort of, like, you were like the side or the sub coach before, right? Is this your first proper like head coach gig?
I don't know. So before FPX, I was with G2 for 1 year.
Were you the primary coach of them?
Yeah, I was head coach of G2.
Ah, okay.
We were the best team in Europe for like 6-7 months, or number one at least, and then got top 4 at Masters Berlin. And then after G2, not gonna lie, I just wanted paid a bit better. Could have got more work in at McDonald's. So yeah, I went to North America after that. But in my time at G2, I was working with Kellogg's, Mixwell, Avova, who are in my team right now. So,
was there some connection with how they ended up in the team, or you ended up in the team now?
Not particularly. So basically, what happened was I went to North America after that. I joined a lesser known org. They were called Dark Zero. Maybe like I think we were 69 for something in North America. We had like no budget kind of talents, and then we ended up getting top 12 in North America. So. Yeah, just before I left as well, I was still helping them, and we got into kind of like top 10. But after that kind of went away, that's when and then the chance came up to work with the FPX guys. It was never going to be a long-term thing. I'd never been an analyst really, so I helped them out more strategically, analytical stuff for champions. And then after that, Angel, who was the IGL of FPX, was basically like, mate, you shouldn't be an analyst. You should be a head coach. So I kind of just took that as like, it's one of the best kind of IGLs. And I wanted to be a head coach. So I got talking to Heretics, and then it kind of just went from there. They already had Kellogg's. So Kellogg's joined Heretics after G2. Heretics locked in Mixwell, kind of like before I was there. So yeah, or around about the same time. So basically, like when I got to Heretics, it was Kellogg's, Mixwell, and then we built the rest of the team.
I actually had a question about that, because I didn't know what the timeline was, or if you had anything to do with the roster stuff, because one of the things that happened towards the end of your time at G2, I think it was when you were there, was the whole like Mixwell being kept in the roster and Kellogg's was benched, and then Kellogg's was being put in the roster and Mixwell was benched, and then it was like back and forth a couple times. And I found it quite funny when obviously all of the rosters got announced for the partnership teams, and they're both in the same freaking roster again, which was something that was such a controversy on G2 and seemed to be deliberately trying to keep the two players apart. Do you have any insight onto that, or like kind of what the problem was there and how that has supposedly been able to be overcome in order to have those two work together on the roster together? I know that there's been kind of a slight role shift there, so they're not necessarily battling for the exact same role in the team anymore, which was part of it last time.
Yeah. No, so when that whole minus Kellogg's plus Mixwell, minus Kellogg's plus Mixwell, I had nothing to do with that. I was already out of the team. It was Pipson, I think, that took over after me. I was already chilling in Vegas, to be honest. I had the feet up at the pool, just watching it. I was loving life. I wasn't really. It was like, I love those guys, so it was kind of harsh, but no, so like the start of that kind of like role clash happened because we lost one of our players mid-season. Pith, he quit. He was super stressed. He left us like 10 days before our first event of that season when I was still in G2. And we were forced to get a player, and I just wanted someone like really individually talented, and there was no good kind of sentinel players to pick up. So we got Kellogg's, like he was an unreal talent. And already at that time, I'd already kind of said to Mixwell, like, I'm not saying he didn't have it to be a duelist anymore, but in my opinion, he was wasted as a duelist. He brings so much to a team in terms of his experience and mid-round calling, and he wasn't making enough space for how I wanted our duelist to play. I just wanted like a young kid to just go in sites and headshot people, and let Mixwell kind of take a step back and actually use his experience, right, and take on different roles. So that's kind of how it started, the role clash. And to be honest, I think when in G2, Mixwell was obviously kind of like, well, I'm getting taken away from the star role. I still want to do it. But I think it wasn't until probably after I left and the whole Mixwell Kellogg's thing, he realized then, like, yeah, it was probably for the best. So they're completely fine now. Mixwell knows what kind of role he wants to be in. I think that's the only issue they had back then, was he'd been taken off the role that he wanted because he still wanted to be kind of like the star duelist, right? But I think he realized himself that it was probably better handing that mantle over to someone like Kellogg's. And that's kind of what happened. But to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what happened with the whole minus Kellogg's plus Kellogg's situation in G2 after I left. I kind of just like stuck my head away and just worked away at my own thing in North America. So yeah. But they were always good friends. They always got on really well. So yeah, no issues like that anymore, thankfully.
And in light of that conversation, has Mixwell now graduated? Like, what's the role of? He's going to be the leader, essentially, is the premise of what he's doing in the team now, right?
He's not the IGL, no. He's more. We've had kind of like leadership problems in this team. I'm not going to lie to you.
Okay.
This team was built ridiculously quick. So Heretics were very, 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 very late to the party. I think they were very focused on the league team, building their League of Legends team. So I was already trialing actually with two other franchise teams at the time. One of them was to be an assistant, the other was to be head coach. But when Heretics came in and they were like kind of describing what it would be, and I'd get to work with Kellogg's again, that's when I took the job. But by that time, kind of like all the players had already been snapped up. So even the VRL players had already taken it. So we had, I think, we built the team from 2 players to 5 in about 10 days. Like, it was really quick.
And did you how far before lock-in did you lock that in?
Before Brazil, you mean, or before that? Yeah. So before the first, there was a soft roster lock, which we didn't know was as serious. So like we rushed to get the team built like really quickly, and we locked it in before the first roster lock. So it wasn't like we were out of time or anything, because when we locked the team in, it was back in November or something, right? Like before November. So like we actually went to a tournament in India, literally like 7 days after we made the team, just to get some LAN experience for some of the guys. So yeah, it was locked in pretty quickly. But looking back at it now, I don't think there was anyone we really could have gotten that I would have preferred, because I mean, Mixwell's very aware of this now, but after the G2 roster, he kind of developed a reputation of, this guy doesn't want to play the game anymore, he's just a streamer. So a lot of the people we tried to get didn't want to join because of that. Which sucks, but people just kind of go by what they hear, and they don't actually, like, Oscar's not really like that, you know. If he wanted to stop playing, he could easily make a living streaming, right? He wants to play, he wants to win. So yeah, there's no excuses there. We locked the team in pretty quickly, but I was happy with the guys, and we kind of ended up with a team of people that are on like a redemption curve, to be honest. Like, we've got Avova, who
yeah,
I mean, everyone except one player was in G2. They're all in the same team, right, at one point. So
yeah, pretty much.
Just doing formation in it.
Yeah, it's like a happy reform, right? But
yes.
One thing I said to Arnout Heretics, I was like, dude, the one thing I don't want is just to get like my whole old team back. Like, I want to try like something fresh. Like, we ended up with that anyways.
Yeah.
Like,
no, the funny thing is, if you hadn't have told us this story, people would just assume these were your boys and you just chose all them, you know?
I mean, no. It didn't really go like that. Like, we did try out other people, but the problem was, like, we had such a short time frame to do it. And we had 2 events. Actually, we had 3 events locked in that we were playing in. So we had, there was an online event, I can't remember, Navi played it. It was quite good, actually. It was like back in November, December. Then we had the Indian event.
One?
Yeah. So we had the Indian event, we had the GLL event, and then we had Red Bull Manchester. So we had like 3 events to go to in the space of 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And I always felt like, for me, it was is good to get some experience and like some LAN experience for the players, and to meet up and actually bond as a team a little bit, whether you win or lose. So for me, that's what I wanted to do.
I'm very curious how your experience in Brazil kind of like shaped what maybe adaptations or whatever, or things you learned about the team going into VCT, because I think that Heretics are one of those teams in Brazil where there was some quite like idiosyncratic things that came up with it, like quite characteristic parts of the team. And like one of the really big spoken about ones was, for example, like the hot and cold nature of Kellogg's performance. And I think it was obviously very clear kind of the role that Mixwell was taking on as well. Not that that's necessarily a positive or a negative thing, more just like a neutral point. But obviously, you guys played against Evil Geniuses and you played against...
That was it.
No one, that was it.
Oh, that was it? That was
the
it?
first round match they lost, yeah.
So getting that opportunity to play against like a North American team who you may otherwise not have had that choice, that chance to do. Do you think that like exposed you to sort of like things that you maybe wouldn't have found from like the scrims that you're doing in Europe, for example?
Yeah, 100%. And I think I'd already known the EG guys quite well, or at least the core of the team, because we played against them a few times. I played against them a lot in North America. We played them in one of the VCT qualifiers. So I knew kind of exactly what we were going to go up against. We had a lot of problems as a team, though, to be honest. Like after Manchester and Red Bull, like we had a lot of internal issues, which I'm glad is out of the way. Like we dealt with a lot of stuff in between. India, it was a great event for us. We came second. We lost to Paper X after being together for like 10 days, so it wasn't. We done well.
Oh, bad team.
Manchester. Yeah, like Manchester, we had some okay results. Like we probably should have beat 100 Thieves. I think we lost 2-1. We beat FUT 2-0, and then we eventually lost to Liquid and Vitality. And that was the event where cracks really started to show. Like individual feuds within the team. So it was kind of like a really early on warning sign of what was going to come. And we boot camped in Madrid for 2 or 3 weeks before we went to Brazil. So that was another like intense kind of preparation, and again, cracks started to show. So yeah, I agree. Like without that experience in Brazil, I think we would have had these issues now during our first season, and it would have been catastrophic. So I think some teams who haven't had that experience yet are going to go through it this season, to be honest with you, because it happens in every team, right? Every team's going to have a big fight, or you're going to have some kind of confrontation within the team, and hopefully that we've had all of our kind of big ones now. We've swapped around the roles a little bit. We've changed IGLs. We've changed around the responsibilities in the team. And yeah, our practices before Brazil, they weren't the best. We were kind of arguing, fighting, but when we were on form, we were incredible. And it's the same now. After Brazil, we've been performing really, really, really well in scrims. So when we were coming up to the first game, I think everyone was very confident. But honestly, I think it was a bit of nerves in our first game against FUT, where we just kind of fell apart, and we've picked it up so far. So we'll see how it goes. But so far, so good, I think.
By the way, one thing I wanted to ask you about was, obviously, like I said, your former team, who are now the Na'Vi players, like that's a pretty interesting lineup itself. Like, what do you think of this squad? How do you think they are in the post-Ardis world?
So I was only really with them for 2 months, so I'm not going to say I know every in and out of the team. I think Angel is like an incredible leader. He's a huge part of that team. I don't know internally how the changes are going, but they've got so many good individual players that team is going to be crazy no matter what. I think like the only concern for me when they kind of had to, when Ardis left, was just what Ardis brings to the team. I think Ardis is obviously good individually, but people that don't really know Ardis don't know what he brings to the team. Like that guy is such a big character. He's such a funny person to have around. He just makes the great atmosphere. Like you'll never come into a day of scrims and it's boring, because he just brings so much fun to the team. And he's just like that kind of guy that if you lose a crap round, or he'll just pump everyone up. Like, guys, forget about it. Who cares, man? We're going to do the same thing to them. And like you can really build up momentum with someone like Ardis. And then obviously they've got CNED in, who's incredibly skilled, but I think he's a little bit quieter than our personality. For me, I think that's like the only struggle they'll have, really. And once they probably already have, to be honest, fixed it. I'm sure Angel's dealt with worse issues in his past teams. Yeah, like you're probably getting a equally skilled player in CNED, maybe a little bit less versatile in terms of like the agents he can play, but yeah, like they've got so many good individual players and probably one of the best IGLs in the world. So I think they're still going to be favorites to be, top 1, top 2.
I am curious on the topic of Ardis being one of your ex-players. How do you feel about the way that NRG are utilizing him? Because there's been, I think, some discussion about that, especially NRG had an interesting series in their most recent series. And on that, was it Lotus, where like Ardis went like 10 rounds without getting a kill, something like that? It was rough. But obviously he's been playing like a lot of Rays, for example, whereas like, obviously the meta is different. Last year we saw a lot more chamber, and we've seen him on Jet and stuff before. How do you feel about this? Because there's definitely been some conversation or opinions expressed by people about just it feels like we're not seeing him at the same kind of like performance that we were seeing him in FPX.
Yeah, again, I don't really know much of the ins and outs of that team, so I can't really say from their point of view. But from the outside, like he's played Raze before, so I don't think it's a skill issue. Like he's good at that agent. I think the biggest thing with Ardis is, like you said, he was on chamber a lot. He's really good with an op, so you can't really do it as much with Raze. But I think Ardis is the kind of guy, if he has a couple of bad games, he'll pick himself up and he'll learn from his mistakes. So I'm sure like whatever role they use him on, he is literally one of the most versatile people I've ever coached. So he'll figure it out. Like, and I think they've got a really good support staff as well. They've got Chet, who's incredible. They've got really good analysts and stuff that can help them out. They've got a good assistant coach. So, and they've got a really good IGL. So, I mean, for me, it's just a matter of time. It's only one game, right? I think that's one thing a lot of people do in Valorant. It's probably the same in CS. Like people, I'm not saying they overreact, but you lose one game and it's like, these guys are crap, or what are you doing? This guy's trolling. He's gonna get replaced for this guy, and it's like, man, it's one game. It's a long season.
Well, yeah, I mean, and actually, they're like their first game of that series or map of that series, even though they lost it was a 13-11 loss. Was actually like good to watch. The way that people have spoken about, and obviously kind of what happened in Lotus isn't representative of the way that the first map went, even though like the series was a 2-0, therefore it looks worse on paper. You know what I mean? Yeah,
exactly. So I think those guys will be fine, and Ardis will be fine. Trust me. Like, if there's one thing about that guy, he can play anything. In G2, he was playing Sova, he'd play Cypher. In FPX, he was doing the same thing. He'd play Cypher, he'd play Chamber, he would play Jet, he would play anything. He would play Breach if you wanted him to play Breach, and he would be good at it. And no matter what happens, just because of his personality, even if he has like a bad game individually, he's still contributing to that team. Like, trust me, he's still contributing to that team, no matter what. So even if he's got bad stats or whatever for 1 or 2 games, it doesn't matter, because overall he'll contribute to the team regardless of his individual performance. And that's by the way, he's one of the best players I've coached.
On the thing you say, like that is definitely a famous thing in esports. I just call it like result whiplash, because what happens is they just react to each result, like you're saying, like it was the totality of like what that team could ever do. So what they'll do for real is like you lose the game and it's like someone must be caught. This fundamentally can never work. Like the coach did it wrong. It's everything. But then you win the next game and it's like it's back on track. Like they're doing it. Like actually maybe there is more with that player. And the worst example, like they do this in CS and League of Legends, is they'll do it from individual games in a series. And some of those examples are beyond feckless, because they'll do it where, for example, like it actually, you sort of tell on yourself you're a casual. Like in CS, they'll do it where like the favorite team lost the first map and it's like, bro, it was the other team's map pick and they're like not good on that map. Like that's actually the expectation would be they'd lose that one. But the fan thinks because they're better, they're going to win every game. So that is just the way people do it. It's true, the sample size. And for me, the bigger issue on this topic, especially the CNED, Ardis, like look when they put them on the other teams and how does like Ardis go into Ye's shoes and then how does CNED go into Ardis's shoes, is that what that tells me is a bigger point that I've seen in all esports games, which is when someone's a star player and they have the amazing stats and they're the carry player, we do tend to hype them like they're sort of doing everything and then the others just like exist around them. But like at the end of the day, the rest of the team also has to be fit to them. So you can't really just walk in and take that guy's job. Like, you could use any sports example you want. Even if you took Messi and Ronaldo at their peak, mate, if you'd swap the teams, look, eventually I imagine they'd make it work, but they wouldn't the next day. Like, obviously, Ronaldo would be way worse than his team than Messi. I think actually they would both look at worse players, and the teams would look worse initially, even though, like, certainly those are deals you'd make if you had to. You know, if you had to replace one of these players, like, if you have to replace Artis, see, it's not really a bad pick, is it? If you have to replace Ye, Artis is a pretty good pickup. Like, I don't blame him for any of the moves, but I think people expect them just out of the gate to be, like, equally as good as before, but with this guy's own unique elements added in, you know, which seems implausible. Like, if you look at all the super teams so far haven't got really going yet, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's literally, I mean, I was going to say something, it happens in every sport, even football, right? It's like Messi, Ronaldo, Haaland, like right now he scores 30 goals and he has like 2 games where he doesn't score a goal and everyone's like, oh, he's washed, doesn't deserve to be there. It's like, bro. And it was the same thing when we lost against FUT, and even the casters in the studio for our game after we beat
the casters were after one game.
I mean, like, when I was watching it back and it was like against Karmine Corp, it's like, to be honest, I didn't think Heretics were good enough to bring it back in 2 days. It's like, bro, I can do a lot in 2 days. Like, you know, it's not like it's not like our practice from 2 months that we've been doing just goes out the window because we've lost one game. Sure. Like, it's not like I'm changing the world in 2 days. We have a lot of stuff to fall back on, and sometimes it is literally just you can come in and you have a bad day. You have one best of 3. If you come in and you're not in a good mindset or your team isn't performing how it should, you're going to lose the game. You're coming up against really good teams. And it's the same as, like you said, it's the same as artists. Like, he's switched to another country. He's with another region. They practice completely different. Steened's coming from a completely different style of team. He was with Ascend, who had, I'm not saying they had no structure, but they ran around and got kills. And you go into FPX and it is literally regimented, right? Like, it's very tactical. It's defaults, very CS style. So if you're taking someone like that and putting them into that system, he's not going to just instantly drop 40 kills every game. Like, it is going to take time.
I do think it's interesting as well because, like, even though you say, you know, like, artists played Raze is very, like, flexible player, it's still, like, over the course of the last year, like, the way that we even think about roles has kind of, like, changed, because rather than if you go back to, like, 2020, 2021 and you've got, I played Duelist. But, like, instead something like a Raze is going to be a lot more of a blurred line between being, like, a duelist and being parts of, like, other roles as well. So it's kind of like the pacing and the responsibilities and stuff. While you may be good enough at them, it's still, like, a change of pace and you're working under someone else's leadership. And it's still just, like, different environmentally from, like, all of those things. Like, especially coming off the back of a year of fucking Chamber.
Yeah, exactly. It's a completely different style and it's a completely different mindset. Like, even in Brazil, he was playing Sage on, like, 2 maps. So he's gone from playing a Sage to then playing a Raze, or you played Jet, then you go to Raze. But it's not like he's just joined that team and he's strictly a duelist. He's playing other roles as well. So naturally, especially, you're not playing against a bad team. They played against one of the best teams in their league, right? If you aren't on the ball and you aren't 100%, they're going to punish you. Like, that's as simple as it is. So,
would you actually say, by the way, maybe it's a function of the meta or where the scene is at, would you actually say at the moment as well, are people sort of still viewing Valorant at the moment at the pro level through the lens of a couple of years ago, where obviously originally it was just you watch the Jet player or the Chamber player, like, this, of course, this is going to be the person popping off and the whole team's built around them. Is the meta different now? Because I noticed even at the VCT, it seemed like a lot of the players who were getting the big FOBs weren't the traditional obvious carry or the duelist always, you know.
No, I think it's definitely transitioned. Like, people are giving a lot more respect to the people who support. Like, you've got Leo, who's now
everyone was loving him, right?
Fnatic. Yeah. Even in Giants, like, you've got the kid called Cloud. He's getting a lot of respect or a lot of attention. So it's not just the duelist. I think people are now starting to realize, like, you can be an insanely impactful support player. And, like, really, like, the IGL for Leviathan is insane, and he gets so much praise. So it's definitely not just the duelist. Like, before, it used to be just the duelist, or majority the duelist. I think it was like CNED, or in the EU anyway, it was like CNED or Kellogg's or Darke. But now it's like people are actually looking at other players and giving them the credit they deserve. But they're also popping off on other agents. So it's not like you need to be a duelist now to frag.
Yes.
So.
Oh, there's another thing as well. I will say one of the first things as an outsider I noticed when I watched a bunch of the pro games in Valorant is I was shocked how many teams, sometimes the AWPer isn't even the player who's clearly set up to be like the carry player. Like, if you come from CS, like by default, you're either just a bad AWPer or you're the main star of the team. Like, it's just the way the game works. So I think people also miss that part when they think it's like CSGO, but with anime graphics. No, because the agent part is what changes it. Like in League, the agent would be, the champion would be based on whether you're the carry or not the weapon, as it were. Like in this scenario, the weapon part seems like a lot more set on player preference, how the team wants to be set up. There's not like a set rule. Like you don't always have to have the AWPer be the chamber back in the day, right?
Maybe with Chamber is a little bit different just because it was so broken.
Fair enough.
But like, or on Jet, for example, like if you have a Jet, you're more likely to give that person or not. But there are teams now who are doing exactly what you said, right? They're not giving it just to their duelist. Like Karmine Corp, for example, Nivera, he'll op on smokes or he'll op on the Sentinel. It's just a different way of doing it. It's like probably like a really passive style CS opper. Like Smiths from back in the day, right? Like it's probably that kind of role you would give him. He's not going to be the guy running in, open up bomb sites, or maybe like Fallen when he was IGL and op, and it would maybe be kind of similar to that. But it's not like every op person is like a Kenny or a Zywoo or a Device or a Simple or something, right? It's like it is starting to transition a little bit, but the way Valorant is, like if you want to op consistently, especially on defense, like Jet is the agent that you'll see it with most because you can get high ground, you can go for crazy picks and dash away. You don't really have that in CS, right? So I think it's still.
They also told me that's the OP thing just because of the reposition. Like that's like the dream would be if you were AWPer, you could reposition it, be OP as fuck, wouldn't it? So
yeah,
makes sense.
I think that's why everyone use. That's why you use Chamber. Like you could do something just ridiculous if you're watching from a CS like fundamentals point of view. You would never push slow by yourself with an op and leave a whole lane open if you die, but in this game, you can, or you could, with Chamber, get a kill, and then you could teleport back to the bomb site. It's literally like on Inferno. You could push all the way down on Inferno, get a kill, and then TP from Banana all back into coils or something at backside. Yeah. If you could do that in CS, people would do it. But yeah, that's just why it was so kind of broken. But it's changed a little bit now with the nerf. No one's really playing Chamber as much anymore. But
I think also like there's a little bit of flexibility in it at the moment, just because there are quite a lot of teams who are opting to not bring duelists on certain maps and stuff at the moment. So like if you're gonna bring an operator, like it's definitely not going to be played on a duelist, right? And like Nivera is a good example of that. So yeah, it is interesting actually, like the fact that a couple years ago, because obviously such an influx of the early Valorant pros were ex-CS players, and yes, while they are still ex-CS players, a lot of them, like they've been in Valorant long enough that you would probably associate them with Valorant now more so, and they've kind of grown with the game. So it's like, obviously, very early on, people are going to be coming in, they're going to be playing it by sort of the CS way of playing, because that's what it was born from, right? Whereas I think that Valorant's starting to get to that age where we're starting to see things sort of like that next kind of level be developed in terms of how people can play the game. Like if you go back and you watch gameplay from like, let's say like Masters Berlin, even Champs 2021, you're probably going to watch it and be like, whoa, this feels so like simple in comparison. Like all these things that felt like such hyper deep strats and the ceiling of the game, like the ceiling's different now.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also with the agents that are getting brought into the pool now, like you've got Gecko, for example, where you can literally send someone else to go plant the bomb, or Harbor. It's literally you can bend the walls whatever way you want. So yeah, I think the game's definitely evolving. It's because the new agents are coming in and it's adding like another kind of like dimension to the game. But yeah, back even a year and a half ago, I think it was very CS fundamentals would win you the game. Like it still is. There still is a lot of CS fundamentals in this game, especially when you're like entering bomb sites, like the spacing, the pathing you take. Trade fragging super important. So a lot of it is CS kind of fundamentals. It's just a little bit different now, especially if you lose your only smoke player. That's like huge in this game, right? In CS, everyone has the same smokes, everyone has flashes. If you lose your flasher and you lose your smoker, it becomes a completely different game. And I think that's where Valorant's changing as well. People are realizing that. So you have to be kind of prepared to play a different style depending on what happens in the round.
Yes.
So
I would even say the interesting thing to me, this is why actually I've always thought the silliest thing people did was try to make the contest like it's going to be CSGO versus Valorant, because as far as I can tell, both games are actually pretty healthy. They don't have that much overlap beyond the first generation or two of people. And quite frankly, they seem to even have different audiences and like fat player bases. Because to me, I actually did think you can see a lot more overlap in terms of how the game plays meta-wise to like Overwatch actually. Because I always thought the part that was really fascinating as an FPS person, but who knew a little bit from League and Dota just about how MOBAs work, was there was a lot of MOBA thinking in Overwatch, if people don't know. Like it was all about like you hold the blade from the ninja guy. I'm just doing this for people who don't know the names of the characters. You hold that because you know when you do that, that prevents someone else from doing an ult. And essentially it's a bit like a League team fight. Like you know the key players that have the ultimates that they're going to use, and it's more like everyone needs to use it in the right order, and this follows this, and this is a counter, but if we get this off first or this one's blown, we can attack in a different way. So like you say, the fundamentals of the round look like Counter-Strike. Like you have the same routes that you go as the entry guy, people use the utility to get you into the spot, you plant the spot, but there's also that MOBA element of like has this been used? Like where's that particular agent that I have to watch out for that counters my ability? That part's quite interesting to me, because I actually feel like that's where I feel like as a coach you could have way more impact on a Valorant game than CS. Like in CS, I've always said people to some degree slightly overrate the coaches and the IGLs, because once the players do the entries and get on the bomb spot, it's just they're just playing Counter-Strike at that point in time. Like your part's over. Like you can't blame the IGL for if they win the 1v1 or the 2v2 or something. Like it feels like in Valorant there's a lot more to remember, and that's to sort of like, I feel like people have to have things in the back of their mind in a way that you just take the certain fights. You can go on autopilot eventually in CS to me.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. I mean, I played CS for a long time at Source from 2000 and oh god, I don't even know. I don't even want to think. 2007, and obviously I played CSGO 2016. I think I quit 2017. So it's like CS was like the one game I loved, and I was like, I could never play another game. But then when Valorant came out, it was literally by the end of my CS, it was in UK, so UK CS, like it was a big huge meme, right? And I already realized pretty early this ain't going anywhere. I better go back to uni, get a degree or something. But no, I think like in CS, it was just getting to that point for me where I like to think I like to innovate when I'm playing or when I'm playing games. So in CS, it was just getting very stale for me, and it was very hard to break kind of into the higher tiers when it was so much individual skill. And like you said, you can go autopilot and just kill people. In CS, like all the smokes were the same, all the lineups were the same. It's kind of better now that the maps have changed. Like there's new maps coming in, but it literally was the same defaults, the same kind of like roles, the same strats, the same executes, the same fakes.
You don't have like new characters coming out that change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The joke is, I actually think low key, it's kind of what fans like about CS, because if essentially you're a fan of the superstar like Nico or Simple, they're just good for like 6 years straight, because if the game doesn't change fundamentally, so as long as their level stays really good, they can just be good. Whereas if you've ever followed any game with MOBA components, obviously the balance is crazy, the impact it has. So you can go from best player in the world to like 30th just because the game changes, you know?
Yeah. And that's why I've never ever tried to compare CS to Valorant, because they are just like CS will never be. I don't think another game will ever take over CS just because it's CS, man. Like, it's CS. I love the game.
It's so accessible.
Everyone in this team, like if there's a major on, like we will all watch it together because we all love the game. Right. So it's not like we hate CS, right? We all love it.
Yeah.
But for me as a coach, it's just Valorant had so much more. It was fresh, to be honest. Like I was like 28 or something when I decided to quit CS, and I was like, I'll go back to uni, got a degree, started working a normal job for a bit. Then Valorant came out during lockdown, and I was like, you know what? Let's try it. So yeah, I don't know. It's just different and fun, and no rounds really ever the same. No games ever the same. You come up against different teams in scrims. That's another thing I liked about Valorant compared to CS. In CS, like a lot of teams would be you play the same kind of executes and you try counter the same kind of stuff. There'd be a little bit of innovation, but in Valorant, no matter what scrim you're playing, someone's going to probably be running a different comp. Someone will be trying different agents. You have to think differently every game. And like you said, like coaches can have a lot more impact, especially with the overall game plan. But I also think in this game as well, you do need a really strong IGL who has a very, very, very strong kind of direction and way how he wants his team to play, right? I think that's why Buster, why Angel are so good, because they just grind and they have a very clear plan of how they want the team to play.
By the way, Gio, when he says that about getting a degree, I've noticed how many times you've baited people with your social media, where you'll just put like a picture, it'll just be like, just messing around with some sort of like equations or whatever, guys. And then there'll always be a person like, you should try doing a degree. And that's like, you'd have to understand, it's like Yu-Gi-Oh! That's her trap card. She's just waiting for that.
No,
because not only does she say,
that fucking tweet from the other day, right?
I've seen you do it a few times though. Not only do you.
I wasn't baiting anyone.
No, you're not intentionally. No, here's the key thing though. The key thing to say is this. She doesn't just say, I've got a degree. She even showed the degree. And here's all you need to know. It's a degree in physics, Neil, from King's College London, which is like that's a flex and a half right there. Essentially, that's like if you were American, if you were like, I'm just fucking around with some stuff, guys. And they were like, you want to learn tech? And you were like, actually, I have a PhD from MIT. It's like, all right.
Okay.
You have sat him down on that one. It was good. It was well played. Well played.
The whole thing with that tweet was basically I had put on my Instagram story a picture of some notes that I'd taken during Worlds about.
Oh, right. It was actually about esports.
It wasn't.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't
Fair
anything
enough.
to do with like anything sciencey. I had put up some League of Legends notes, and a guy DM'd me saying, "You should like, how about you get an academic degree instead?" And so I just took a photo of my degree. I was like, "Okay, done." Like,
this is a pretty good flex, like I say.
That's a good flex.
Especially because, like I said, the sickest part of the like humble brag nature of the flex was that she didn't actually even mention anything about the specific college. But if you don't know, for physics, that's probably like one of the best colleges you can ever go to in the whole world. Like that's a flex and a half that you didn't even mention that part. You just showed the picture. Like, well played. You played that well. It was good. You had that ace up your sleeve the whole time, I see.
By the way, gamers, get a degree. Don't drop out of school.
Yeah. Oh no, by the way, as a real piece of advice, here's another thing that's made me actually quite controversial in esports. I'm not one of those people who thinks esports is like a religion. We all have to pretend everything's awesome. There's no downsides. Like I've always said, the reason I think that whole topic of like, and then like I had to drop out of school to be a pro. It's like, no, you didn't, bro. Nobody has to drop out to be a pro. I'll tell you right now, when people say that, they think you mean I was just a normal player and I dropped out and I went pro. No, like, as a semi-pro, you better be that close to the pro level before you consider quitting. Like, you don't have to actually just quit at the beginning and start. Like, you'll know based on even playing semi-pro amounts, like in your hours outside of school or your job. You'll have an idea if you're vaguely good enough, guys. And if you're not, don't take it. Don't jump in. You'll probably ruin your life. What you don't want to do is if you're the guy who plays semi-pro and you're like just pretty good at the game, maybe you're skilled or you got a mind for it. If you can get to like the semi-pro level and you're like a little bit below or on the public game, you're really high ranked, then you could maybe make the sort of like informed decision that you go all in and quit your job or whatever. But I've always thought that thing where people act like you have to just believe and go. No, there's a lot of people you should know already if you're good enough, mate. You're not really going to level up like 50% when you quit your job. It's probably going to be 5% to complete it, you know.
I mean, I feel a bit of a hypocrite because I did drop out of university with basically I finished my bachelor's degree, I dropped out my master's degree, and then I was like, I'm going to try and get into esports. Okay. And I had like no experience or whatever. But I also had the means to do that. And I always kind of say that to people is like,
save up a year or something.
Right, like don't do it if you're just like running on ambition alone, because like okay, just as obviously a slight like tangent, but like I always kind of say to people is to make it, and whatever it is not exclusive to esports, not only do you have to be skilled at what it is you're doing, but you have to have a natural intuition for the industry that you're going into, because you need to know how to navigate your way into the space that you want to be in. And if you don't have that, then dropping out of something and just hoping for the best is probably not going to work for you. Yes. So get a degree. No one knows how long esports is going to last. Like TSM, CLG dropping off the face of the earth. It's not a good sign. The Book of Revelation is upon us. Make sure you have an education.
I think my internet died, but I think I'm back.
Maybe. Yeah, you're back.
Right. The moral of the story is, you managed to catch that at the end.
It's all good.
Yeah, I mean, I agree as well. But I said that to, even when I was on IGL, my teams, I always had guys like, just go get a degree or something. We're playing part-time anyway. And then, it was the best thing I ever did, to be honest. I still done it when I was playing as well. Like, I was playing, CS, coaching CS, and then getting a degree at the same time. And even when I was in Valorant, I did my final year in uni whilst coaching G2, so it was rough, but still got first, so we take those right in our brag. But I done construction project management. Construction
That's so
project
random.
management. So it was, it's like a completely different style, but I went and worked so I went to college first, like when I was like 26, 27. Started doing a degree in that. Worked in construction for like 2 years, and then when lockdown happened, that's when I got a chance to join G2. So I was like, do you know what? Finish the degree, see where it goes.
Thing is, that might actually be the ultimate esports synergy inadvertently. Just think about it, right? What you could do now is when Valorant closes down and everyone's career's over, they can all just come and work on your building site. They can have IME and artists there, bricklaying, chucking bricks up. You'll run the whole thing, of course. You've got the degree, so
exactly.
You'll be the fallback. I know. Say that again, mate.
It was fun.
Yeah, go on then. There you go.
Oh no! I'm saying it was fun. I'm saying it was good fun, like doing that. Doing that degree, and I got to meet some interesting characters on our construction site. It makes coaching gamers completely different and
right.
I won't say easy.
No, sure.
Not as challenging.
Manageable.
Not as challenging. I'll say.
Yes.
I was gonna say I feel like
I don't have to worry about anyone here shooting themselves with a nail gun.
Yeah, there's that. Yes. They would if they could. It's just luckily the guns are all virtual in Valorant, so you don't have to worry about that.
Oh my fucking god!
Exactly.
Yeah, probably.
By the way, to pivot a bit, a couple of teams I want to ask about. One is, obviously, I want to ask about Karmine Corp. You mentioned earlier, Nivera. What do you think about this team? Because to me, I don't really know, mate. Like, when I look at it, it looks like they've clearly just gone super hard on that angle. I think it has to be people from the French-speaking world, which is like, look, that's an angle. That's certainly an angle you can take. Obviously, your team's Spanish, so you have mixed ones. I get that everyone wants some of those elements combined, but I don't really know, mate. When I look at this roster, is this going to be a top team in Europe? You believe it?
The thing is, like, they've got the firepower for it.
Okay.
They have the firepower. They have the experience and Scream.
But all of their ideas are terrible.
Oh, that smile. What a smile. I know. His brain thought about so many things there. I know. There's so many things.
But it's true. It's like they have talent. They're just not utilizing it.
I think it's more like we watched like 2 or 3 of their games, and like after 1 hour, we knew everything they were going to do. So when we went into that game, we would see one start and tell in one of their traps, and we would just avoid it. Or we would bait it out and go the completely other direction. And they never changed anything. So it's like they would have a very set routine, and they would place a very set utility. So it was very easy to counter. And I think like if any other team, I'm not saying if any other team loses to them, but if any other team wants to win, they just do what we do. And anti-strike them, basically. Just put the work in, right? Like we sat for a long time, I'm not going to lie, studying all their games, but that's the only worry I've got for those guys is once you know what they're going to do and you get the tells and you make, as long as you can communicate it to the players and make sure they can understand what they're seeing in game, then you have a big advantage over that team. But on raw firepower, it's good. Like they have a lot of firepower.
That was one of the notes that I remember like making during lock-in, was that they seemed so one-dimensional in like kind of what it was they were doing. I even wrote down Scream should probably stop IGLing, which I don't think is like a particularly unpopular opinion, but like I think the thing in lock-in that seemed kind of clear, I don't know if you agree, is that it felt like having Scream on the role he's currently on was a conflict with what Scream is good at, but it felt like Scream was struggling with that. So like it almost looked like he was struggling to keep up with everything while also trying to manage his own shit and what he was trying to do. Now, as far as I'm aware, it was Scream who specifically wanted to IGL, right? And he has had IGLing experience on Liquid as well. But I have to be honest, like, I actually, because I didn't see your game with K-Corp live, I went back and watched it, but I didn't just watch the broadcast, I watched Sideshow's co-stream because I heard that it was very funny.
The one with all where he got flamed by all the fans. Welcome, by the way, welcome to Karmine Corp Sideshow. We've all been dealing with that in League of Legends for fucking years, mate. If you ever say a single thing about Karmine Corp, like, the joke is, if you said that the player they like is like second best, not the best, that's like the worst insult you ever do, and you'll just be attacked. Like, they've got mad fans, mate. Some really mad fans. I'm not surprised Sideshow got it in half.
I heard that it was really funny, so I was like, okay, I'm going to put this on and, like, put it on.
He was definitely flaming him. I saw some of it, mate. He was flaming the fuck out of him.
Oh, 100%. There was a comment that he made that I kind of like sort of was having the same feeling about. And that was, he was like, I feel like at this point, the only explanation for why they're doing certain things they're doing is ego. Is like, because this is just what they want to do and they refuse to hear otherwise. Because especially like, I mean, one of like the biggest complaints obviously was like how they were managing their economy in that game, and stuff like that. And it's like, these are things that aren't like, for pro Valorant players, they're not hard things to grasp. This is not revolutionary stuff. So what is your excuse for not doing it? Right? And like, I've definitely heard through the grapevine about like things that kind of, like, you know, Sliggy had to get irritated with them about like when they were on Liquid and stuff. And it's just like, it seems to be just an insistence on still doing them, which is like, it's kind of frustrating to think about that, because I quite like Scream and Navira as people. They don't seem like difficult people, but it seems like there is a real stubbornness in the way that Scream particularly wants to kind of run this game. But it's just like running themselves into a wall. And it feels like, wait, because like you said, there's a lot of firepower on the team. Well, like, where the fuck is it? Like, it's so wasted potential.
I think it is because they're playing on such a set game plan. And like, one of the things, I'm not going to give away everything because I don't want to help other teams beat them, but like, or help them get better for that matter. But like, when we have someone like Kellogg's who's really good with an operator, we watched their games and I was like, dude, you're going to destroy this team. Like, they're going to give you so many opportunities to kill them, because the way they clear angles, and this was what kind of surprised me because it's kind of different. And you would think with Scream and stuff, they would have CS kind of fundamentals, but when they were taking space, they rarely use flashes, they rarely use utility, they just dry peek it. So Kellogg's, we just told him, you know, you'll go here, you will get free kills. And he did it. Like, he was just picking them off kind of one by one because they like to save all their utility for executing the site or for post plant. So I think that's like, they have a lot of things that they need to think. Once you disrupt their plan and don't let them execute the plans they have, they don't have that much experience, I think, with adapting after that happens, which is why against us, they ran the clock down so many times, just because they don't know what to do when their game plan gets kind of messed up a little bit.
Yes.
I guess it's kind of like boxing, right? When I know that old thing where it's like, if you have a plan until you get punched in the face, then you don't know what's going to happen. It felt exactly like that against us. I don't think they're a bad team by any means. Like, they have incredible talent. I think PM, their coach, is a super smart guy. So like, if they can turn it around, I'm pretty sure they can. But I think they have to change. Who am I to say, right? But for me, playing against them, it felt like they maybe have to change their way of approaching the game. I'm not sure if it's just Scream or if it's a coach or whatever, but yeah, if teams are going to do what we did, then I'd be worried for them. And teams do have a bigger staff. Like, I think we are the only team in franchise that has such a small staff, and we were able to do it, right? So
they've got like more resources.
Yeah, it's just me and my assistant coach. So it's like teams that have analysts or two analysts or a strategic coach and an analyst, then I think I'd be worried for them. But with that firepower on the team, they can still get results.
Yeah. Because like, I remember like during Brazil, one of the things that I like noticed was, you know, in a lot of rounds, it always felt like it was kind of like Scream would be the last guy standing. And that's what sort of also helped like give me this idea where it's like, it feels like he's struggling to balance focusing on what everyone else is doing while also focusing on what he's doing, you know. And yeah, they had some strange, I remember their like Haven defensive setups and stuff like that would sort of like, you know, this was like at a time where you would always have like, I don't know, like, was it like Sova Jet would position on A long to like start off the round, and you would have like Scream KO on his own on A long instead. And it's like he would like dry peek. And it's just a lot of confusing things. And I think the reason why they're getting memed on so hard and it's like being spoken about so much is because particularly Scream and Navira have been on one of the most you know, venerated EMEA teams in kind of the so far history of Valorant, and are known for being such insane players. I mean, obviously Scream, especially with his background in CS and whatever. And so it's sort of like they're getting memed on hard because it's like, wait, hold on, this isn't what this is supposed to be like. It's just bizarre.
I'll also throw in as well, that's the downside, unfortunately, if you're a player on a team that has like let's just say passionate fan base. I'd say like intense is like the kindest I'll give them. Essentially fan bases that attack you. I've had my problem myself. What happens is when they essentially constantly argue with you and tell you you're wrong about every opinion, you can sometimes in your brain conflate those fans with the players and the team and start to feel like, actually, fuck that team. Like, and then you're almost loving it when they lose. Like, see, they lost. But then you have to realize, wait a minute, I'm not even mad at those players. I'm just mad at those fans. Like, that actually has nothing to do with the team and the play. So I think in some ways, essentially, it's the same in like league with like TSM fans or whatever. Like, part of the reason people want to see TSM lose is just because the fans are super obnoxious. It's essentially like Man United fans back in the day in football, if people know. Like, so you don't have to actually hate the players. Everyone sort of loves Alex Ferguson and all those mega players, but everyone hated the fans who were just 24/7, bragging and all. So the second they fall, of course, we go 10 times harder. So I think some of that's built in as well. So I don't even blame the players for that. Like, just the nature of having nutter fan base. What about this then? Go on then.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, I'm definitely curious because, their next game is obviously going to be against Team Liquid. Do you think that, the remaining players on Liquid who were their ex-teammates are going to have a significant advantage at being like, all right, well, we know what their weaknesses are and whatever, and just kind of like do that? Or how do you think they're going to match up?
I think if they watch the games, they'll have a pretty solid game plan to play against them. And Scream's openly said that he or his team struggle against aggressive jet operators, which is why Kellogg's kind of picked them apart. And Liquid have Safe now, who when he plays jet, like that guy is aggressive. And he's very smart when he does it as well. He's not like, he will just Hail Mary it sometimes and send himself in, but he's a very clever player. And if you do your research and he watches the games, I think he's going to find gaps in Karmine just like we did. And Safe is incredible. I think he's probably one of the highest fragging players just now in the league. So I think like for Karmine, they'll probably be quite worried about Safe because they struggle with jet ops. It just depends how Liquid approach the game, if they keep him on jet or they want to put him in as a duelist. But I think like that's one thing Liquid can use, like Safe for sure.
Do you think the Liquid lineup is for real? Are they going to be one of the best teams?
The thing is, right, like this is another thing after Brazil, like everyone was like memeing on Liquid saying they're finished, they're done, and then Safe came out in his interview and was kind of just like, he was very open in his interview. He was not trash talking, but he was saying he doesn't agree with Redguard, the IGL. He's saying he doesn't agree with the coach. But I think for me, the talent that team has, like they're going to be one of the best. I think if they can all agree on a game plan and all agree on how they want to play, like you've got Nats, who's one of the best. Like Nats, Safe, Yampi, they're all insane players, and then you've got Redguard as well, who's one of, if not one of the best IGLs in Europe. So, and Soulcast as well. Like people always give Soulcast a lot of hate, but I think it's unjustified sometimes. He's a really good teammate. I played with him in CS a long time ago, and also like he thinks he's a really good teammate as well. And he's not just stayed on that team for no reason at all, right? He's on that team still for a reason. He's got incredible aim as well. So I think Liquid will be strong. They're one of the better teams who play in scrims right now. So I'm not saying scrims do everything, but obviously you can kind of get a feel for how teams are.
Here's the thing: you can't be amazing in scrims and be utterly terrible. Like there's got something
exactly.
That's the case, isn't it? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. That's why when people say, "Oh, it's just scrim boxing, you're the best scrim team in the world," but in Valorant especially, like Ascend were smashing everyone in scrims. They ended up winning Worlds.
Right.
Gambit were smashing everyone in scrims.
Right.
They were an incredible team. So I do think in Valorant, like because it is a completely different game from something like CS, scrims they can be a very good indicator of where a team is.
Fair enough.
And I feel like if you come up against Liquid and you were trouncing them 24 and it felt like they had no idea what they were doing, you would be like, okay, maybe this team's going to struggle. But they're a very good team when we play them. They have so much individual skill. So
I think also like... Sorry.
No, on you go. I was just going to say, I think it is just another case of people jumping on them as soon as they've lost a game, right? And I think they're just at their throats way too soon. Like they need time. It's a completely new roster.
Yeah, I was going to say, I always kind of like... It didn't really surprise me that much when Liquid didn't do like incredible at lock-in, mostly because, when you got players like Redguard and Nats, they're coming in from X-Gambit, like M3C, whatever, like they didn't get a lot of chance to play last year. And they also obviously like probably like in terms of like the tumult going on in their lives because of all the political shit that happened, like, and they're still being kind of held to the same exaltation that they were after stage 3 in 2021, because people know that these players are really, really skilled. Like, you know that it's still going to just take them a little bit of time to like warm up while also synergizing with a new team. Like, I feel like that's a situation where I feel like it's not too hard to see that you need to cut them some slack a little bit at the very beginning, because like while they're still super talented players, this is like, you know, it's not like they've been playing for the entirety of 2022 at like the highest level like a lot of these other players in the partnership teams have been. And it's not for lack of skill, it's more just been situational, but they're still going to need some time to build that back up, right?
Yes,
exactly.
I'll also throw this in there as well. Bearing in mind, like as you said, Neil, how impactful an IGL can be. This IGL's gone from speaking Russian to Russians to speaking in a fucking international team where he's speaking English. And I'll tell you, the flaw that people make, because this is why in CSGO it took so many years till we made the big international teams. And quite frankly, if you look at the international teams in CSGO, it's not that international just is better. You just have to have way better players, and that's just sort of worth putting up with the compromise of not speaking your own language. Like, essentially, like it isn't that you would just make it like League of Legends where every team's international. There are benefits to speaking the same language. So one thing I've heard in CS, especially from people who did that, they went from like, I was in a Danish team to like, now I speak English, is obviously they're all fluent in English. If you had a conversation with them, it'd be fine. But that's because the time limit is unlimited in a conversation. You've got as much time as you want to explain yourself. I can ask you, what did you exactly mean by that? The point is, we're going to communicate. We're going to get the ideas across. But I've heard the biggest problem is if you're an IGL and you switch, there's a warm up, there's sort of a ramp up time till you get as comfortable in English, saying things really quickly. Like I've heard it's the mid rounds that are the nightmare, because essentially, like if the same call takes 2 seconds longer, that doesn't sound like much to a casual fan, but in the game, that's everything, right? If you make the perfect call, it's the timing that pulls it off, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think another huge thing about switching from a team that's fully Russian or fully French, for example, right, is like the culture difference. Like culture differences are huge, and that translates into game. By the way, like people. They think the same way if they're from the same culture, or they've been brought up in the same game. So maybe they're more inclined to play aggressive in certain situations or defensively in certain situations. And if you're with 5 other Russians who think exactly the same like you, they've been brought up, they played the game like you don't have to communicate as much. Yes. So your comms on a fully speaking Russian team they're very clear, they're very concise. You don't have to speak as much.
It's almost like a shorthand, right? You don't have to say it all, they know what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And they also will understand how Redguard's been IGL, and so he's leaving all of that, coming to a team that I don't know how Liquid was built, but I still think the best way to build a team is you get an IGL and then he picks the players. And as a coach, you kind of like help facilitate that. Obviously you want good players who fit your style, but at the end of the day, it's the players that are playing. It's the IGL who's going to be leading the team when it gets on the server. So whether he's had the chance to kind of like pinpoint the players he wants, other than that, I don't know. So that's another thing people need to consider. He's maybe not got. He doesn't. Maybe he doesn't have the players he wants, or maybe they don't fit his play style or how he sees the game. So you're going to have that as well, where he's going to have to try and figure out. I've went from a team of Russians who would probably do absolutely anything I tell them to this team who are culturally different. They've got a completely different game style. They believe the way they want to play is right, whereas I believe this way is. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of like giving and taking, and someone's going to have to compromise. And when they do that, like they're going to be incredible, I think. So maybe it won't even happen in the split.
They still have their ex-IGL still on the team.
Yeah, exactly. So
the sub player, right? Yeah, true. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like
and they have Yampy as well, right?
Yeah, they have Yampy. Yeah,
that's true.
And then I also think Safe was helping, or at least is very vocal about how
he like a secondary caller
sees the game.
Right.
Yeah, so you've then got 3 people who've probably got like a style of play, right? And it's gonna take time. It is gonna take time, but I think eventually they're gonna be good. No doubt about it in my eyes. They're all really good.
By the way, those are the teams where what I always say, Gio, in other games like League, for example, is I take it like the stock market. And if every pleb fan sees a team like that stacked with like talent, they're just like, this team's garbage. It's like, I'm just buying at that point, mate. That's like a stock I know is going to perform one day. It's just mega cheap. Like, it's on sale. Of course I'm buying now. Because the point is, if you go in now, then they can't say in 6 months when they're the best. Like, everyone knew they'd be good. Like, no, you all said they sucked. You all said they should change after bloody 4 series ever or something. So, like, to me, especially when there's a lot of talent, it's easy to buy in on teams like that, isn't it? Like, as you say, Neil, like the point is, if you have enough player strength, essentially, you're going to just keep trying stuff till it works. Like, in case you get very unlucky and it's something like, the star players don't fit with the IGL or something. And that's it, something like that. They're going to figure it out eventually. If you have enough talent, like, it's hard for a lot of talent to fail. It's a lot easier for like random lineups too, but a lot of these players are just bona fide, mate. Like, they're just going to make it eventually.
Yeah, they will. I think eventually they will find their way. And maybe they have to make one change down the line, who knows? But if they only have to wait one change, they've already got the core from this team now. So
yeah, that's another underrated part as well, right? Is if you only end up having to make one tweak, essentially all the work you do now is not for nothing. You're still working on something, then you make the one tweak, you go right to the top. You don't have to start at scratch, guys. You're not kicking the whole team,
Yeah, I mean, look at Navi and look at Fnatic, right? Like, yes. Fnatic's core's changed a bit, but they've gradually changed it over the space of since Valorant came out. They've kept the same core and they've maybe made one or two changes to the core, but they've kept their leader. They have the same values as a team. Everyone's buying into those values when they join. It's just going to take time to bond, basically. So,
what if we pivot? What do you guys think about Team Vitality? Gio, what do you think?
I haven't seen a Vitality game yet, so I don't think I'm necessarily the right person to ask.
What do you think, Neil? Is this going to be? It's an interesting mix of players, is why I ask. So, what are your expectations for this squad?
I think Vitality at the start, everyone was saying or rating them as one of the teams to qualify. And to be honest, like when we scrim against them, they're one of the best fundamental teams that we play against. And it is a weird mixture of players, but it's also players that have played together before, or at least the core of that team's played together before. I think they were in OG before, so it was like Mosey. I know, like our IGL or our player right now, Boo. He was with that team, and he was with the coach. So basically, I think the coaching staff, all of the coaching staff, and the core of Vitality were together for a year already. They've been playing together for a long time. So I think like with that team, they have a lot of synergy already. They have probably the best support network, I would say, in Valorant right now, in EMEA at least. They have the best kind of like, they have the best support in terms of they've got their own apartments. Everyone's very settled. They're the only team that's actually moved out full time. I think the whole team moved out to Berlin in December or January or something. So they have a really good support system. They've got 3 main members of coaching staff. They've got 2 mental coaches, a manager. Like, they are very well supported. And they've got some really good individual talent. So I think they can do very well. They're still like a dark horse, I would say. They don't have as much firepower as like Liquid, Fnatic, or Navi, but they're a difficult team to play against.
Are you a guy who's big on Bone Cold? Were you a fan?
I don't really know him personally, to be honest, and I don't really know how he is as an IGL. Zeke played under or played with him in Ascend in my team, so I've heard kind of stories, but I don't think he's like the main catalyst of the team. I think he's super experienced, and I'm not sure, to be honest. From what I've heard, I don't think he's he's the one pulling all the strings. I think they just have very good synergy and they work really well as a team together. Like when you see those guys outside of the game, like they are like 5 good friends, right? They're going out every weekend, going to the cinema, having dinner. Like they're genuine friends, and I think that's a big part of why they're good.
Okay,
they're a proper team. Like they're a proper team, and they've just got really good synergy together because the core of that team has been together a long time. But no, Bone Cold's obviously got a lot of influence, right? Like he won champions and now he's in a really good Vitality team. So it would be unfair of me to kind of give my views on him because I don't really know him that well. But I've only ever heard positive things about him. So yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure he's been a good pickup for Vitality, I think.
Right, here's the obvious question, and I want to get both people's take on this, right? Is Fnatic just the team that hit the ground running first and they just got to the top and now they look awesome? Or are they actually going to be the real best team in Europe? Like, should this roster be the best team in Europe?
So I originally thought that Navi were going to be, but after seeing So for me, I was never like a hyper Fnatic fan. Not that I didn't like them, but I always kind of felt like there was something missing from the team. I just couldn't really put my finger on what it was. And I think with Leo and Chronicle having joined the team now, it feels like a complete team. Like it feels like, oh shit, this is a team. And after the way that they've played with those two on the team, like I feel very hot on Fnatic. And they do feel like they've hit the ground running like really hard. So there is that, but I don't think that's like a fluke or whatever. I think it's like they've actually found kind of whatever their secret sauce is to really like nailing that. And sure, maybe other teams are going to catch up a bit in time as they've had some more time with each other. But I would feel comfortable saying that I would suspect that Fnatic will be the best team in Europe.
Where are you at on them, Neil?
Yeah. I mean, we play them tomorrow, right? So I'm not going to praise them that much.
Okay.
Yeah, like we've watched a lot of their games, and I'm confident against them. I mean, I have to be, right? Like I've told the guys, this isn't the game that's going to make or break our season. So we're going in with all guns blazing. Like it's whatever for us. We're going to have some fun, and we can beat them. Like we can beat anyone when we're playing the way I know we can play. I know a lot of people like, "Law, you're trolling," especially if it doesn't go well for us tomorrow. But on paper, like the team is incredible. Like Boaster, I think Boaster is one of the people I respect the most in this game, just because.
I mean, you know where he comes from. He was back with you guys with the fucking sewers of CS, basically, right? Wasn't he? It's wild.
Exactly, yeah, he was like
Insomnia BYOC hall.
No, for real, yeah.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, like he was fucking getting screamed at by Smuriel every weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like no, I don't know. I just respect him so much in terms of how much work he puts in. Yeah, he puts in so much work, and he's got a genuine, like, burning desire to be the best. And he has a very clear kind of plan of how he wants his career to progress and how he wants his team to play. And I think he's just like evolving over and over and over. So for me, he's one of the best IGLs. And then when it comes to the other four players, you could argue they're, at least every single one of them is probably in the top three of the roles.
They seem like they've done a very shrewd job with how they've put that team together as well, because it isn't like they just picked good players. Like, it looks like they have a good balance of people without like the biggest ego or this person fits their role. There's not too much overlap. Like, they look like they've done a very good job building the squad, mate.
Yeah, and I think they've also done very good scouting, because the players they picked up, like Alpha and Darkade, they were like two of the more unknown people. They've plucked them out and they've turned them into really good players. So it's like, obviously with Leo and Chronicle, this is probably the only time I would say that they've went for people that are well known and proven to be good. Whereas before, they'd usually just go on like the unknown kind of talent. And I think that's obviously credit to Minnie, the coach, and to Boaster, and obviously if there's any other scouting staff out there, they're doing a really good job. But I think it is also down to the fact they've kept with the same core. Fnatic have supported the same core. They haven't chopped and changed after one loss. They've really given it a try. And they've just made improvements where they feel they need improvements. And so far, it's definitely worked out for them.
When Alfire came in last year, it was really at the time that they needed him. And he seemed to be like quite an explosive addition. I mean, he was playing a lot of Raze at the time, right? So explosive, like literally in gameplay as well. And now, obviously he's not necessarily playing that role as much, but like is being really... I think like the thing that I've enjoyed seeing about Alfire from like when he first came onto Fnatic to now is that when he first came on, he was like, this real, like it was hard to miss him because what he was doing was such a, quote unquote, like star player kind of way of playing. But now he's also proving himself as a very, very solid support character as well. And he doesn't need to be in the limelight in order to provide a lot of value to the team. Leo, obviously underrated for a really long time and is now kind of getting his flowers, I think, for how good he is at his role. I mean, particularly like his Sova, that's what he's really known for, right? But Chronicle especially, I just think has been such a blessing to this team because I think like one of the problems that Fnatic maybe had in the past, you could argue, is that they had really strong players on certain roles, and then they had really serviceable players on other roles, but not as much room for flexibility because like there was still some gaps in maybe like what some of those players could provide. Whereas Chronicle can kind of just like WD-40 his way into anything. Do you know what I mean? Like he's just can take up whatever it is he needs to. And because everybody else is just so on the same level in terms of the value they can provide, it just provides so much flexibility for the team. And I think that's just like such a golden thing to have, especially in this era of Valorant where not only we've spoken about how the roles get a little bit more blurred, but also as more agents come out, I think what we're seeing is like rather than like, you know, there being one meta comp that you can apply to basically every map, it's like each map's going to have its own, you know, it's getting more and more its own playstyle, more and more its own different compositions. And so like on one map, maybe, I mean, this is a bit extreme, but like on one map, maybe you want to play double duelist. On the next map, you don't want to play a duelist. Like to have the option to be good at every single permutation that you could possibly consider as the game continues, continues to evolve. I think Fnatic are in such a good position to do that because of the skill and the flexibility of the players that they have.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that will obviously become more and more OP the more agents there are. Because one thing I always try to point out on this show, Neil, is people also forget the area that this isn't like League or CS is the ban system in CS is the map. Well, you just brought the map thing to Valorant, but then there's no banning of the agents. So the problem is if agents are OP, not only can you not avoid them, you have to deal with them. But it also means, unlike in League, like I've mates who are coaches in League, you can practice all week long and then the fucker just picks the right draft strategy against you. He takes the right chat characters out and it's like, fuck, my practice for nothing. You know what can stop you in Valorant? If you have the comps that you want to run, everyone can run them. Like it's essentially how good are you executing, right? It's a different game.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right as well with what Gio said with Fnatic specifically. Like they've picked up 2 players now who maybe in the past they wouldn't be able to play different agents to such a high standard, but now they have it. And they also have the firepower in those roles. Before they had people who maybe weren't as consistent firepower wise, and you could still call, like Boaster could call a perfect round, they could play the round out perfectly, but they wouldn't win a one-on-one with whoever they need to win, and they would just die. Like at the end of the day, you still need to kill them, right?
Yes,
But
exactly.
now, like Chronicle and Leo, you can put them up against any player in the world, and like they have a really good chance of winning that 50-50. So that's another huge part. But I think I've always believed as well, the more this game evolves, the best teams in the world are going to be able to change comps very, very quickly,
right?
Over a space of 1 or 2 days. And especially when it comes into maybe next year when there's 2 splits, or like right now where you had like a super week where it's 2 games in 1. If you want to avoid what we did to Karmine, you'd be able to switch comps in the space of 24 hours, and everyone could play different roles, and it's super hard to then counter you. So I think like that's going to be what the best teams in the world are going to have to be able to do as the game progresses even more. So when you pick up players that can play more than 1 or 2 agents to a high standard, that's when you're getting really close to being the best team in the world. And I think Fnatic have that now, if they wanted to kind of do that approach.
That's also just to kind of like bring that back to kind of things that we discussed a little bit earlier. But that's another thing that I think really discerns the game from something like Overwatch or League of Legends, because while there's like, I mean, in Overwatch, you might have a little bit of overlap, maybe in a very contextual setting, but for the most part, like your role is your role. Right? I mean, definitely in League of Legends, there are going to be certain champs that can be played in more than one role. But like, if you know, unless you are like, I don't know, like being like your team is literally changing the role you are playing for that season, like that's different. You're not going to be changing between each game or anything like that. Whereas like with Valorant, it seems to be really trending in that direction, where you can't just specialize in a role. It's not going to work that way. Yeah, you need to be better than that, and that is like a monumental ask if you consider it compared to other games where that simply isn't it. Like you don't just get to be a master of your one role.
Yes. That's also what's going to be OP if you think is like, as you're saying, in other games, it's actually the same in Overwatch that people don't know. Like, you know who's going to be playing the Moira, etc. You know which character is going to be played by who. So that's also part of your scouting. Like, obviously the hardest thing, Neil, is if you play against a team, but then they actually could play the same agent with 2 different players and swap the roles. Like, you'd have to have a totally different take on that person's position, how you use it, what tendencies. It's good. It's obviously a really good angle. Again, the flexibility. You can see how this eventually will be pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think Navi FPX, they did it when I was helping them. So like they changed comps mid-tournaments after 3 days. So it's like, I would hate to be the analyst in that team. You've literally sat there for 12 hours studying their game, and they rock in with 3 different agents in a completely different playstyle. And I'd be like, yeah, stuff this. And when I was trialing for FPX, basically what they did was they handed out a task to loads of different analysts and stuff, and I'd never been an analyst in my life. So I was like, screw it, I'll try it. And the task was to anti-strat them when they changed their comp, and I had to do it in the space of like 45 minutes, and it was hard.
Right. Okay.
Having to look at how they change their play and how they can change their comps is not fun to play against. And I think they're one of the only teams apart from NRG right now who can probably do that. I can't wait for Fnatic to do the exact same thing tomorrow and all our scouting's gone out the window, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, they're one of the only teams that are really capable of changing comps very quickly, and I think it is just because they have such a good support staff. They've got a really good IGL who can facilitate it. So it's not an easy thing to do, by the way. Like to have players that can switch, it's really not easy.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that's kind of plaguing our team right now in terms of flexibility. We have a couple of players who are really strong on certain agents and not so much to others. So it limits as a coach what you can how you can put the game plan forward. But the positive to that is you can be very good at one style, and it can carry you through a couple of games.
Sure.
But definitely, like, it's something that we have to think about as coaches for the off season, for example. Like, they'll have to grind different agents. They'll have to try and learn different agents, and evolve if they want to stay at the top. And I think that's what every player is going to have to do in franchising, because there's going to be kids in the VRL who can play all those agents, and they're hungry to get to the top, right? So
yes,
it's going to be interesting to see what happens, especially with other franchise teams, because I think everyone's going to go down that route. I feel like they kind of have to.
Right, there's a couple of other teams I do want to talk about, but I'll set this one up. So if I talk about Giants, Neil, I'll do it in true Thorin CSGO style, even though I'm not an expert about Valorant, but watch, I can do it anyway, mate. It's all right. Basically, I would call Giants, if I had to characterize them, team leftovers. This is like if someone was like, I've made a super team out of all the best bands ever. You're like, holy shit, name them. And like, I've got a guy from the Beatles, holy shit, it's Ringo. All right, then, okay. I've got that guy from the Rolling Stones. What, Mick Jagger? No, not him. Ronnie, no, not him either. The other one, okay, who else? It's like, if you go down the list, look, all these players have been in teams, we've seen them in squad, but none of them were the main player. I don't know how they've ended. This squad's so weird to me, dude. It's like they did just collect together all the leftovers of these other teams.
Honestly, I thought that's what you were going to say about my team, so I'm kind of glad you've dropped that on another one. I thought I was going to.
I could have, but you know,
because like, we have been hit with that before. Yeah, we've been hit with that before. It is kind of like, it is what it is. But like, I think with Giants, people underrate that team, man. Like, I think they're underrated. They have some really good players. Like, so they have Nuki, who I coached in G2. He was incredible.
Was great on G2.
Yeah, he was incredible for us in G2. I think like role-wise, he's in a bit of a crisis right now because he's insane on Duelist, and he's obviously having to fill right now because they already have a Duelist in Fatinho. But Cloud is incredible. I think that guy is a huge talent. And he was like, Giants were one of the guys I was kind of around for a bit, and I got to see some of their players when they were doing trials. And I was super impressed with Cloud. I think he's Russian, and it was just kind of like the complete opposite to what I expected a Russian player to be like. I kind of thought they would be very quiet, very cold, very to themselves, but this guy was super talkative. He's very young, his comms are incredible, and I think people were starting to praise him after Brazil. He had some really good games. Right now, they're 0-2, but it's not like they've played bad teams. They've played two really strong teams, and I think they've had respectable results. So like across the board, I think the only thing that, or the only person, or one of the people that gets a lot of kind of heat is Rhyme, because he's came in as an IGL. He's never done that before, but from the very, very short kind of interactions I've had with him, he was a true kind of like leader type personality.
Right.
And I was actually impressed with him, to be honest. I was impressed with Rhyme. I was impressed with Cloud. I've obviously seen Nuki before, so I think people are kind of sleeping on Giants. We'll see how their season goes, but it's definitely not a team that I would underestimate. Like when we are playing against them, no way. I think they have a lot of upset potential, and I think they also performed well in Brazil.
Wasn't Rhyme the player that a lot of the story that they were talking about him in Brazil was that like this is kind of his last chance and like to sort of make it or prove himself, especially as like even though he's not a young player, he's like a young IGL in the sense that he's kind of like new to that, or like he's sort of, this is sort of like the last spot for him in that,
like,
sense.
Yeah, I think he did get quite a lot of heat after it, because a lot of people were like, again, it's the same as HLTV used to be on forums, man. You see all the threads, like, he'd have one bad game, it'd like, kick this guy, what's he doing here, bad IGL, look clueless. But, I mean, from my interactions, he always seemed like a kind of natural leader, but maybe it's different when it gets into game and it's under pressure. I'm not sure.
I definitely liked. I found the way they played in Brazil actually quite interesting, because the biggest thing that stood out to me about them was they were so patient and they didn't get baited into anything. Like forced errors and stuff like that, or rather unforced errors, like just weren't really a thing. So like they were very good at like being sure of themselves, I guess, and not panicking into certain things.
Yeah, I think it's because they also have a lot of experience on that roster. With Hoodie, he's been in some really good teams. He was in G2 after I left. He was in G2 with Nuki as well after I left. And they went to some of the biggest events, and Hoodie was always one of those players that was kind of underrated. I think he's underperforming a little bit just now, but if he like gets back to his form, then I think they can definitely cause a lot of problems. Same with Nuki. I think he's probably underperforming. He'll even say himself he's underperforming a little bit just now, but that's the thing with that roster. If they can reach the level that I know they can, and I'm sure they know they can themselves, like they will cause problems. And I think it's the same with all a lot of the franchise teams. On paper, kind of looked like that, where it's like our team looks like we've got a lot of like leftovers, and people say that about Giants, and people were giving the Turkish teams a lot of hate. But on their day, everyone is good. It's like it was the best people that these teams could have got at that time. It's not like people got picked up for the sake of it. They got picked up for a reason.
What about the Koi team? Where are they at for you? In the middle, maybe?
Yeah, I think Koi. So when I was in G2, I had Kodamenta as my GL. And I love the guy. Like, he's such a funny personality to have in the team. He's still got like a really tight bond with the guys in my roster right now because we got on so well. So any team with Code, I think, has historically done very well. And in terms of talent on that roster, they have a lot of it. I think they have Wolfen, who's like an up-and-coming kind of talent. He's getting a lot of hate right now because he's the duelist in the team and he's maybe not performing up to standard. But again, they're going to be good as well. I think a lot of these answers probably sound the same, but they are. I think this league is so open right now that any team can beat anyone. And that's kind of what you're saying.
And there are only fucking 10 teams. Like, people forget there's a lot of talent in the whole region. There's only 10 teams. So logically, unless everyone did a terrible job as a GM, these should all be squads that can go somewhere. It's not like the 10th team had no one to pick from. And if you add in the angle, like this team purposely picked French speaking people, this team wanted people who are Turkish. Like, actually, if anything, there's way more spots like that weren't even available. Like, not every spot was an English language speaking player trying out for it. So I think that's the part where people are looking at this like it's LEC, like the 10th team sucks. It's like, no, like aside from the super team rosters, all the rest of them look at there's a logic to how it was constructed, like there's clearly a game plan there. And also there must be so much talent that's waiting to come in the league. Forget like when I was saying earlier that you could change a player on at Liquid. Dude, loads of these teams could take a player in if they need to change one key position, right? So as long as you get the rest of the squad good, a lot of these teams could be strong, surely.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, for example, our team, we had two options, right? We could have built around 3 unknown players that, to be honest, we didn't have the time to scout them out, so that was never an option for us. Or it was picking up people that we know can be good. They're maybe just on a down right now. And it was like a redemption arc for our team. And I think maybe you could argue Giants were in the same time, like in the same kind of boat. They were getting, Hoodie, he was really good in G2, fell off a little bit. Fatinho as well was always kind of like one of those guys that people were predicted to be at the top, and he's kind of fallen off a little bit. So same with Koi. They've got Trex, who is incredible. They played really well in Brazil, in my opinion. They had a really close game against NRG. They probably should have won it. And then they beat... Who did they beat in the first week? Navi, I think? I think they beat Navi the first week here. I could be wrong. I think it was Navi. I think they beat Navi 2-0.
Oh, yeah, it was the first game.
Yeah, so... Again, like these teams can beat anyone. Oh yeah,
they had that nearly 40-round map.
Yeah, it was an incredible game. So again, and they have a good coach as well in Barbar. So yeah, I think all the teams are
on Guild, right?
Yes, he's the coach.
Yeah, he's on Guild. Yeah, I also played with him in CS for a year, which was an enjoyable experience. Actually, he was a funny guy. So we go way back as well. And yeah, he was the coach of Guild. So. Yeah, I think they have a good foundation, and obviously, I think how many people from that team were from Guild? 2? Coda, Trex, and was there one more? I can't remember if there was one more.
I think maybe that's it. I think it's 2.
Yeah, Coda, Trex, and Barbar, I think, came from Guild.
Right? Yes, maybe that's it.
So yeah, they've still got some kind of still got synergy there, and they've definitely got a good direction.
By the way, as you said, obviously people did just think like the Turkish teams are just a meme. Like, what can you tell us about these squads? Obviously, the problem is they just don't have the name power. So, like, what should people expect from the Turkish teams?
I like the best. I mean, this is like a CS comparison, right? But it's like coming against, like, you know, when you played Xantares, and the guy's like prime Xantares, he will just out aim you no matter what. Like, and the Turkish players, I think in CS had that. Like, they'll run you down, they'll show you no respect. They will take Angels and they will win the Angels. That's kind of how the Turkish teams are.
Ah, right. If people don't know, what he's saying is totally correct. Even though the Turkish teams were almost never like a top team, like none of them were ever top 10 or whatever. As he says, the one thing they did have was skill. Like the player he's talking about, Xantares, look, he's not going to win a major, but he's as skilled as some people who've won majors, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I feel like that's what it's like with the Turks. They're having really, really good individual skill. I think their IGL right now is statistically one of the best fragging players in the league.
Oh, fair play.
And their smokes players they have a really good duelist who absolutely destroyed us when we played them. And if you have a bad day, like what we did, and we're not communicating properly, we're not playing properly, we're not trading properly, like they will pick you off and you will lose. And I think that's kind of, I don't know what the score is with Vitality now, but that's exactly what happened when they played Vitality just now. They demolished them 13-4. And I think the Turkish teams are also 2-0. So yeah, like again, we got a lot of hate when we lost to FUT because everyone was like, "Oh, they've lost to the Turkish team; they're so bad." But I'm sat there, dude, we prat these guys like they are not bad players. They're really not bad.
Sounds like they got some upset potential then if they've got that kind of strength.
Yeah, they have a lot of firepower, and if you don't take them seriously, like they will cause you problems. I think they took a map off Liquid last week as well. They probably should have been. I think they took a map off Liquid and they were doing really well on one of their maps also. So, yeah, they have a lot of upset potential. And BBL almost beat Fnatic last week, I think. They lost 2-1, but it was close, right?
BBL are a lot of fun. I think that BBL, and this is kind of like really corroborates just what you're saying about the Turkish scene in general, but BBL like look their best when they let themselves play aggressively and they let themselves just like lean into that play style. Like their aggressive defenses look really like good. Kushner, I mean, because here's one thing as well that kind of really caught my eye about BBL, and this was in Brazil, is like they were the first team in Brazil to play the Yoru Pearl strategy. And they were probably, like, compared to other teams that did it, I think there were, like, 2 other teams that did it. Theirs probably looked the weakest, but it was still, like, it's still creative. It was still something that other teams weren't doing. And they were specifically doing it because they were trying to facilitate Kushner because they knew what a strong... an aggressive player he was. And I think that, and Turco and Sushni, like, provided pretty decent support in that. Like, they were against DRX in this game, I just want to point out. So it's not like it was, it's going to go a certain way, right? But I just thought that was so interesting. And it sort of reminds me of, like, it's not that the playstyle's the same, but you know how, like, Paper X are kind of known for, like, they kind of carved out their own playstyle based on their confidence of their strengths. Like, I get that vibe from teams like BBL, where it's like, okay, it might not be the playstyle that works for everybody. They might not always pick the things that, like, everyone else feels safe to pick, but they're very sure of where their strengths come from and where, like, their power is, and they're going to do what they can to facilitate that.
I mean, put it this way, what you said earlier about Team Liquid, I also get a similar vibe just because I know Scream and I know his career. Basically, players like that, they just see the game differently than other people. Like, a lot of fans try to be like a mini coach and look at the tactics and that. There's some players, for real, just view the game as like, I didn't hit my shot. I'm a really skilled player. Now, look, I would say to them, you don't always have to go for a hard shot or do a dry peek or fucking out-aim the guy. That's what coach's job usually is, to convince people to not always try and do that. But unfortunately, a lot of skilled players do just view the game as like... The mad thing is, they can for real go to sleep happy, even though they missed the shots. Like, next time I would hit the shot. That's just how some people see the game, Yeah. It's certainly a way to play.
That's like, I mean, it's definitely, it happens in every team. It happens in this team as well, but that is one of my hardest challenges. Been like,
for sure.
Yeah, if you hit the shot, fair enough, but what if you miss it? Like, now you've lost the round. So it's like trying to get them to play more consistent. But you also need to be careful. It depends what players you've got. Right, with us, we've got Kellogg's. And it's like, if you clip his wings too much and you don't let him go for the stupid plays sometimes, like, you're just making him... He loses his identity and then loses confidence. And for me, that was probably Yeah, he's a confidence player for sure.
Yeah,
And it's like, that's the thing coming from CS. Like, you would see someone pushing in a 5v4 is fundamentally horrific.
Yep.
Just don't do it. Especially against Eco, just don't do it. But sometimes, like in this game, if he's got Jet and he wants to take that risk, he can dash away. It gets him an extra 2 or 3 kills on an Eco round, which is going to give him confidence. Sometimes, like, you have to give those players that kind of freedom. So
yes.
That's also why people. I mean, it's on him, honestly. It's on him or it's on them to kind of realize, okay, that's my limit. I need to understand where overheating is. I need to kind of tame myself and figure it out for themselves. We can only guide them, right? But yeah, I think that you're right with Scream. I think that's how he views the game a lot of the time, and I think if they can play to their potential and everyone's hitting their shots and everyone's trading, then they'll win. They will win. That's the end of it. It doesn't matter. Against us, like, they weren't hitting their shots. Their team play was out, and if you watched our first game, you would think, like, what have they been working on for 2 months? They have zero fundamentals, right? Yes. Like, you would literally be thinking, why is there 3 people in one spot and then one guy back there and one guy back there? They're all not on the same page. And then in a space of 48 hours, it's completely changed. So sometimes people just have bad days. It's 1 best of 3. If you're not on your A game, like, you will lose to anyone in this league.
The Beatles said they get by with a little help from their friends, but I get by with a little help from my Patreon community. And this video was kindly supported by Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, Bot Pounder 420, Tourin, Animosity, Tobias Bernasconi, Jensen Goh, Tosh, and a special thanks always goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to ask me a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers to find out who are the upcoming guests? Maybe you want to take part in one of those lengthy but intense esports discussions I have with my donators, or maybe you want to suggest a guest or a topic that I could cover. Well, if any of those tickle your fancy, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where in the description box below there is a Patreon link.